What's up, everybody? This is the Hedge Mage, and I'm back again with another Pauper video, talking again today about another new card that just came out in Murders at Karlov Manor. So we'll be doing a bit of a deep dive on this card and potential ways that you could play it and what kind of decks it could fit into. I'll also be going over a new brew that I've prepared that will be at the latter half of the video, so definitely stick around to the end to check that out. And if you like what I do and you want to support the channel, if you could leave a like on this video and hit that subscribe button, I would greatly appreciate it. And with that all the way, let's get into it. Right, and the card we're talking about today is Extract a Confession. For one generic mana and a black, it's a sorcery. As an additional cost to cast a spell, you may collect Evidence 6. You may exile cards with total mana value 6 or greater from your graveyard when you cast this spell. So the first line of text reads, each opponent sacrifices a creature. And the second line, which is kind of the more relevant line of why we want to talk about this card today, is if evidence was collected. Instead, each opponent sacrifices a creature with the greatest power among creatures they control. And this is where this card gains a lot of potential in the format, especially against decks like Boggles, which their plan essentially is playing these very cheap 1 mana or 1 to 2 mana creatures with hexproof and putting a bunch of auras on them and swinging at you for a lot of damage. And one of the ways that they generally combat things like Edict's effects, which is one of the, I guess, only two ways that people can actually remove their creatures, since they can't use targeted removal, so you're down to either sweepers or edicts, is that they'll play something like Cartouche Solidarity or other cards that will create tokens for them, or creature tokens, right? Which is how, so they create expendable creatures to get around edict effects. That's how they kind of protect their plan, even going so far as including those cards in the main board, in just in case one of their opponents does have main board edict effects, which there are plenty of decks that do. And that's what's kind of beautiful about this card, is it gets around that. Not only that, we also have to think about decks that are running All That Glitters, which is probably one of the best decks right now in the current metagame. And this definitely works against that deck very well, since they're usually going to be putting all the glitters on one of their cards with evasion, and they tend to play a lot of other creatures and have a pretty strong board presence with things like a Mirror Enforcer and Frogmite, which can be expendable creatures when they are faced with an edict-like effect. So this gets around that because their creature with all that glitters on it is definitely going to be their creature with the greatest power. And now we got to think about too, like, what decks want to run this? I think there are definitely a few, though the collect evidence side of it, it's kind of a huge ask for a lot of popper decks because a lot of them are running a lot of 1 or 2 drops. So they're going to need to have their graveyard pretty full in order to use this card. However, since the Lord of the Rings set, we've gotten these mana cyclers, or these land cyclers rather, like Troll of Khazad-dûm, Lorin Revealed, Generous Ent, etc. And if you are running those cards, I think collecting evidence, or collecting evidence 6, is going to be pretty easy. All you need is a troll in your graveyard. All you need is a Lorin Revealed and another 1 mana spell in your graveyard to use this card. So there's definitely, if you're running any of those cards or any decks that are running those cards, definitely could use this, and it's a pretty solid spell for them. So I think think of some of the decks that would want to use this. I think any sort of Dimir control list, Dimir Terror could definitely use it. I don't know if they actually want to, since they like having cards in their graveyard. However, if they end up ended up milling one of their own Talarian terrors. That's definitely something that they could just get rid of in order to have a very solid edict. Also, Dimir fairies could possibly use it. They tend to play a lot of spells and can easily fill up their graveyard. Though I think probably one of the best decks for this is Golgari Gardens. They are already running lots of spells and interactions, so they can already fill up their graveyard pretty easily. Not to mention, they also run Troll of Khazad Doom, which is basically that is all they're going to need in order to collect enough evidence to use the second line of text on the card. And basically, it's a really great piece of tech for them to fight against all that glitters or boggles, etc. So I definitely feel like this is probably the best in Golgari Garden. So I think any deck that is rather spell heavy or has any sort of self milling type of mechanic within their deck or strategy rather, they could definitely use this. And so with that in mind, even though I had not ranked this card really at all in my previous video of my top three new black cards, um, as the more I've kind of stewed on this card, the more I kind of see that hey, maybe this is a good card. Maybe this is something that is worth looking at and trying out. And I believe it was one of you guys that pointed out in the comments that, hey, what about this card? So, and that's kind of why I wanted to make today's video. Um, just kind of responding to what one of you guys brought up. And yeah, I think this card has a lot of potential, and I'm very much excited for trying it out in some new brews. Right, and the deck we're talking about today is Golgari Gardens. And so this is definitely like a slightly different take on Golgari Gardens. So you are going to notice a few differences about it compared to what you usually see. And I'll kind of be going over like some of those card choices and why I decided to make them. The big one is that we want to, since we are running this new card, we want to use it to its fullest potential. So I am running some a little heavier on some of the bigger mana value cards just to make sure we're always having enough stuff in our graveyard to collect evidence, right? So let's get into what we're running in the deck. So in our pile of creatures, I got 3 copies of Avenging Hunter, which is kind of a no-brainer here. We definitely want to control the board long enough and then drop this initiative creature and just sort of steamroll our opponents. I got 2 copies of Crypt Rats, so I kind of went down one from what you usually see. That's because I want to lean a little bit heavier on some other cards. But still, I think having 2 in here is still going to be pretty decent. Then we also have 3 copies of Thorn of the Black Rose, and you could kind of honestly kind of switch out your Crypt Rats for maybe one less Thorn, and if you wanted to run more main board sweepers, because that is one of the beauties of Crypt Rats is that you can kind of sweep the board and sort of reset things. And then we got 4 copies of Troll of Khazad Doom, and this is mostly so that we can make sure that we have at least one 6 mana card in our graveyard for when we are playing our Edict. Okay, and next in our sorcery pile, we just have 4 copies of Extract a Confession, which we've kind of already gone over why that card is great. That's what we are talking about today. So let's jump in now and take a look at our instant pile. I have 4 copies of Cast Down, 4 copies of Deadly Dispute, 4 copies of Defile, 4 Fanatical Offerings, 1 copy of Snuff Out, and 3 copies of Spinning Darkness. So we are going a little bit heavier on Spinning Darkness. In this build, mostly because it is a 6 mana spell, so that is just one card we have to exile from our graveyard for Extract a Confession. I'm also not running Reckoner's Bargain, but I decided to do just an even split of both of four fanatical offerings and four deadly disputes since they both create artifacts, and I want to make sure that we are going to have enough artifacts on our board just to be able to use them if we don't have a creature that we can sacrifice at the moment, since I am not running any artifact lands in the deck. And we also had cut Tithing Blade, which is, a pretty tough cut, but I just kind of wanted to try this brew out and see where we can go with extract a confession over that card. So we are short some artifacts, so I want to make sure that um, both of our draw spells with Deadly Dispute and Fanatical Offering, they both create artifacts, so we can easily just sacrifice those artifacts when we're casting these cards. Alright, and then in our artifact pile, we do have one Blood Fountain, so this also creates us an artifact that we can use for our dispute like effects, and I'm also running three copies of Ichor Wellspring and two Lembas. Sometimes I see lists that are heavier on the Lembas. Maybe they're not running Wellsprings at all. I'm a bit heavier on Wellspring just because I like drawing three cards with, my Deadly Dispute, my Fanatical Offering, that sort of thing. And that's why I'm kind of heavier on there. You could go heavier on the Lembas, especially if your local meta is very dominant with burn decks or more aggressive strategies. You might want to get a little extra life gain in your main board. And that's definitely kind of a meta call. I personally really like Ichor Wellsprings, and that's why I'm running a little bit more heavier on that card here. And then in our land base, I got one copy of Bojuka Bog, one Golgari Rot Farm, mostly so we can maybe play Bojuka Bog more than once or get some extra value out of our four copies of Colony Garden. Also running one Haunted Mire, which we can fetch with our Troll of Khazad-dûm, running 10 swamps and one witch's cottage, also fetchable with the troll. So we're trying to max out our swamps. So I have 12 swamps in the main deck here. This is mostly so that when we play our defile, it's going to kind of maximize the potential we can have for that card. All right, and then in the sideboard, I got three copies of Deglamour. This is really great against all that glitters. Basically, we can target their indestructible land after they've animated it, and as they're trying to jam in all the glitters on it, we can just have them shuffle that land in their library, which is kind of a bit of a gamer move, but can really shut their deck down. And then we also have two copies of Drown in Sorrow. You're definitely going to want to be bringing this in against any fast kind of creature-based aggro lists. Cold out the red. This is definitely going to wipe their board. And then we got three copies of Duress. This is very good against any other grindy matchups. You kind of want to make sure you're outvaluing your opponent, so you want to take away their counter spells or other pieces of interaction that they might have. Three copies of Nihil Spellbomb. I mean, this is definitely against any kind of deck that's playing out of their graveyard. So any deck that's running Tolarian Terror, something like Turbo Fog, or other combo-based decks that usually revolve on creating loops of cards that they keep returning from their graveyard. Then I got one copy of Serene Heart. This is very, very much a pet card of mine. I really, really like it. I see a lot of boggles in my local meta. So this is a card that I'm bringing in more against them. Let's say you don't see a lot of boggles where you play, you might want to consider bringing in another copy of Drown in Sorrow or maybe another Nihil Spellbomb. Really depends what you see a lot of wherever you play this format. And then lastly, we got three copies of Weather the Storm. This is really good against any kind of aggressive decks, especially burn decks. When they kind of play out their hand, you can kind of negate, for the most part, a vast majority of the damage that they're dealing to you, or just gain a bunch of life. And that's pretty much the deck, guys. So let me know what you guys think about this new card in the comment section below. Are you considering running it? Do you think, how playable do you think it is? Is it something you're remotely excited about? Do you think it's total trash? I would love to hear your thoughts about it. And if you want to check out this deck list further, I got a link for that down below in the description, so definitely check that out as well. This is going to be it for me today, though, so I hope you are doing well, and I will see you all next time.